Take a nice deep breath in and out. That was it.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Expect Miracles podcast. I apologize. I took about a 6-month hiatus from our last episode, but we are rocking and rolling, and I'm excited to crank out some new episodes. And what better guest to have than one of my favorite Blair docs, Dr. John Stenberg, recurring guest. This might be his 4th time on the show. He is an excellent Blair doctor out of Colorado Springs, Colorado, at Zenith Chiropractic. He is also the host of the Atlas of Chiropractic Podcast.
Correct. Yep.
And for those who have been following the Blair Chiropractic Podcast, it was just rebranded, so it's the same podcast. And John, where can you find those episodes? Spotify, iTunes, all that?
All the above. Yep.
Good.
Yep. And on Instagram, if you connect there, all the episodes and clips and things get shared. So give you at least a way to peruse the content and see what you like.
Little sneak peek of what episodes you want to tune into. I like that.
Exactly.
So John, it's an honor to have you back on the show. I love talking to you because we started practicing around the same time, upper cervically. We've learned a lot in the past 5 or 6 years. And one of the most amazing things that you have an edge on people at, I believe, is you have probably interviewed the most upper cervical chiropractors in the entire field. What's that like for you? Do you gain a little piece of knowledge anytime you've interviewed people that have been doing this for 15, 20, 25 years? What's that been like?
100%. And I think, you and I early on understood the importance of creating content, with these people and getting some of these conversations recorded and out there for people to encounter, because we've had mentors that have helped us with things that, have benefited us in so many different ways that it's like, man, I found that if you just reach out and ask the questions, people are so open to share. So 100%.
Absolutely.
And what I've learned is there are no rules. I think early on in practice if we were to think back to like our early days and we were just getting started and learning technique and getting our practices going, all that stuff, it's like, you think there are all these hard and fast rules that you need to learn and follow. And what I've learned talking with different folks is like, man, there's not one path to success. There's not one way to do things. There's not just one perspective that you need to adopt. And so, talk with all these different people, I've really come to appreciate a couple of things. One is that part that there are no rules, but there are certain things that you hear consistently.
Yes.
And those are the things to pay attention to, because the differences and the nuances that apply person to person, city to city, personality to personality, those are sort of variations on the themes. But if you can identify those top principles and those top concepts that everybody talks about and thinks are important, that's where you really focus your attention. So you do those, and over time you have the conversations and you start to notice they all talk about, some of the same things. That's when you're starting to get to the important parts.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A lot of people have different starting points when they start upper cervical. The people that know they were going to do upper cervical, sometimes some of the doctors that have been doing it for 20, 25 plus years, I've heard this a couple times. They'll only focus on the Atlas for the first 3 to 5 years, which I found very interesting, because how beneficial is that just to, focus on one thing, hone your craft into one thing. And then we usually talk to these people, they'll branch out, they'll do some lower cervicals. Sometimes they'll even do some stuff below T1. But I always found that interesting, especially for new students coming into the practice, like the amount of lives you can change from just one upper bone, the first bone in the neck. You can change. I think it's the most powerful adjustment in chiropractic is getting that Atlas put back in place and watching the body heal.
That's 100% true. And even the folks that you talk to that did kind of branch out a little bit, they'll always come back to that. Right. And it's even my doctor, who's been practicing for over 40 years, Blair Upper Cervical, he always, constantly reiterates that with me. It's like, you know what, man, if you get this part right, and you do that thoughtfully, and you prioritize that, and you make that the center, the foundation of what you have to offer people, it's like there's nothing better, right? And if you want to
Absolutely.
supplement, or you want to try to, like, fill in the gaps with other things, that's kind of gravy in my opinion. But it's like there's no substitute for that. You can't stretch
Absolutely.
it away, you can't exercise it away, you can't manipulate it. Like, you have to do the right precision adjustment with that part of the spine to get it done right. And so it takes, I think it's worth, because I did the same thing. I spent the first, I'd say, 3 years just going like, let me get this dialed in, like, and I'm not saying
Absolutely.
I'm an expert. There are people that have been doing it for 30 years plus that are still working on honing their craft. But it's like, I don't even know, what I don't know about this yet. So let's start building our experience and building, that skill of doing a proper Atlas adjustment with as many people as possible. Cause it's like everybody's different. All the
Absolutely.
angles and the approaches that we use, it's like you need to get some time under your belt with this stuff to really build your proficiency.
Absolutely. And one question I get asked a ton is, which I think is changing, why does nobody do this technique? Why aren't there more upper cervical chiropractors out there? What are your thoughts on that, John?
I get that question too, and I've got a couple thoughts, some that people might like and some that they might not. One, I think, is it's hard. It's
Yeah.
not an easy practice to run or to learn. Like, it presents interesting challenges. I think that's why it's so beneficial. It's like
Hmm.
there's the equal and opposite reaction, which is it's a challenge to uh, build these skills, of not just adjusting, but analysis and patient education and management, communication, and the running of the practice is a little bit different because of how we manage folks. So it's hard. And I think that deters some people. I think a lot of people like it in theory, but once they start doing it, it's like, dude, this is not what I thought it would be. And so, some people might find their way out of it, or maybe they, start to deviate from the path a little bit because of the challenges.
It's funny. It's one of the only techniques where one of the mastery parts of it is knowing when to leave it alone. That's
Hmm.
like a mastery within itself. Like putting faith into your patient, like, listen, this is healing, even though we present those obstacles, those healing parts where they've been under care for a couple months and they're retracing and they're not feeling that great. And to look that patient in the eye and say, your atlas is in, your body is healing, we're going to leave it alone. That is a complete 180 outside the paradigm of our healthcare model.
100%. And it requires discipline, right?
Yeah.
On the part of both the doctor and the patient to buy into the process. And that, I think, is in today's world, things move fast, and people want quick results, and often we get quick results, but healing is different than getting relief, and healing takes time, and relief might come sooner, but to create the change that we want, the sustainable changes in people's health that we want, requires time and discipline. And I think that's part of what makes it hard.
Yeah.
And I think another challenge, and this one goes back to the upper cervical chiropractic profession, is I think we've made it very difficult for chiropractors to do it. Meaning,
Yes.
there's been a certain narrative that is like, you have to do C1 only, right? So
Hmm.
there's a lot of people that go, I'd really like to learn an upper cervical technique, and I'd really like to add this to my practice. I'd like to, be able to introduce these techniques. And a lot of the technique organizations and people say, no, you have to get rid of everything else and do this exclusively. And I think that deters people.
Hmm.
And so I think, there's probably a certain percentage of chiropractors that would be doing a version of upper cervical or more upper cervical work if it was a little bit more approachable and not so
Hmm.
exclusive feeling
Hmm.
from the outside looking in. And I appreciate why they do that, because the thing we were just talking about is like, you can't just kind of wing it and
Yeah.
half-ass it and get good results and do a good job of it. So
Cannot half-ass upper cervical.
it's kind of, there's a little bit of a paradox there, whereas we want it to be approachable for chiropractors and not push them away and seem dogmatic, but at the same time, we want to emphasize the importance of dedicating yourself to training in it. So it's interesting, right? There's interesting challenges with it, and I think those are some of the reasons.
One of the big things I think of too is the doctors don't want to take x-rays, especially the old model. If you don't have a CBCT machine, I remember doing in clinic, I would do stress and pressure tests and I was like, oh, I got this. And when I got into practice, I was like, I'm going to take x-rays, but I'll get most of my listings just off palpation and stress and pressure. And oh boy, will that get you in trouble, because everybody's definitely wired different neurologically. It's a good tool to help you understand what's going on, but there is nothing better than that gold standard CBCT image that just, it tells you exactly what's going on. And I remember I took plain films in Dr. Banich's office, then I switched to digital, and just the setup. You have a new patient in your office, you could be taking x-rays from 30 to 45 minutes, getting all the views you want. Now, I think we're going to see more people doing the upper cervical work with the CBCT machine because you set them up. It takes 1 or 2 minutes. You press that button, and it's going to take 14 seconds to capture that image. Where before, I feel like a lot of the students, they got deterred because, I'm just going to spend 45 minutes taking x-rays on this patient. I just want to adjust.
And just to have to take them again, right? It's because you can screw it up. So it's tedious, right?
Yeah.
And I think even with technology advancing, there's still time required to analyze, and to develop your plan with that. I'm kind of curious. I don't know, maybe someday there will be like an AI algorithm or some program where you take the scan and it will give you listings, or it'll calculate.
That is definitely coming. That's definitely coming.
So I think in the future, technology might make that a little bit more efficient, but it's one of those things that there's some tedious parts of upper cervical, and we really get eager to like get to that first adjustment and to take care of folks, but there are some steps that you need to like take your time and do right.
Yeah.
So that everything that happens after that is done properly.
And
so it's a little bit slow on the front end. There's a lot of information, a lot of data, and a lot of testing to gather, but then you can run with it. And I think, that sets you up for long-term success.
I love the CBCT image in terms of patient care now too, because now the patient can actually see what's going on in their neck, and you can correlate the symptoms to, if somebody's got such a huge torqued C2 and their Atlas is here and their C2 is all the way over here, you can see the counter rotation. The patient can see it, they can link it, and you can tell them once we remove this, they're going to start to feel better. So now we have a strong visual connection of why the patient's feeling the way they're feeling. Whereas the digital x-ray, you're kind of like, look, this is here, this is here. You see that? And I would always see their faces. They're like,
yeah, sure. Yeah. And you know what? I think there's something to that, because, and I tell patients all the time, like, I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to be able to see what I'm seeing, because it's your body and you're the one that is going to be going through this process. And I want you to understand the things that I see that are important. And I want you to see, you don't need to be able to read, you don't need to be a radiologist or a chiropractor, but you can see, the changes that are significant. And by the way, like, a lot of these people have already had a bunch of tests done, and they've already been to a bunch of doctors who told them, well, everything's normal.
Yeah.
And if they can look at that CT and go like, that does not look right.
Yeah.
There's it builds a lot of hope and confidence that like, hey, we finally got onto something here that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And then they get the results, and it reinforces the fact that like, yeah, that there is hope that things are going to get better for you. And we've identified some objective evidence that there is something wrong. That means a lot to people.
Most of our patients, they get their MRIs and their regular CT scans done, and they come into our office and they say, why didn't my MRI or my CT scan pick this up? Why did they say I was normal and I'm still feeling awful every day? And I think the answer to that question is nobody's really looking at the misalignments like upper cervical chiropractors are looking. 1 or 2 millimeters can be detrimental to somebody's central nervous system, and it can cause a plethora of neurological symptoms: brain fog, dizziness, headaches, migraines, numbness, and tingling. It's 1 or 2 millimeters. So I think in the MRIs, the doctors are really looking for big pathologies, degeneration, arthritis, stenosis. They're going to pick up on those things. But if you've been told that your MRIs are completely normal and you have a ton of neurological stuff going on, one of the best things you can do is get to an upper cervical chiropractor that has that 3D imaging, because it will start making a ton more sense of why you're feeling the way you're feeling.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And patients get frustrated. So I try to encourage them that, your doctors are doing what they know to do, and they're trained in pathology. We work with dysfunction. There is a spectrum between you have a disease like a tumor or a fracture or some sort of infection in your spine or some sort of, massive disc herniation, and normal, right? And most of the folks we work with, they're somewhere between, that spectrum, and all the bits and pieces might be proper, no damage or disease to them, but it doesn't mean that they're working right. And if they're not
Absolutely.
working right and it's causing trouble for you physiologically, and then that leads to symptoms, a lot of folks get stuck in that gray area of, well, I don't have a disease, but I'm also not okay. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times we can answer that question and fill in the gaps on, yeah, your brain MRI is normal. That's good news. Like, I know you didn't come up with an answer, but it's better that your brain is not damaged.
Exactly.
Let's do what we can to make your body work better, because if it works better and performs better, it'll heal and feel better. And that's kind of where I think we have a ton to offer. And even when a lot of times I'll go back and look at those MRIs, and there are clues, if you know what to look for, that there
Yeah,
are
it's good to
signs that
pull them both up.
somebody could have identified, that misalignment or that structural issue, if they just kind of knew what to look for. So I think it's, it behooves us as a chiropractic profession to, create connections with other healthcare professionals and open their eyes to the things that they could notice, so that those folks get the help they need. Because I think a lot of healthcare professionals, like, they're eager to help their patients, but they don't know what they don't know.
Absolutely.
And it's up to us to help them understand that and do it in a collaborative way, and not, not a way that's off-putting and sort of diminishes their practice or diminishes, their knowledge, but sort of creates, room for collaboration.
Yeah. And Dr. John, what's your thought process on the healing process by itself? In upper cervical, we get a lot of people in our offices with some serious neurological issues. And I know when people see my adjustment videos, they think, oh, one adjustment, that's going to, fix everything, take all it away. We do get those miracle cases. It doesn't happen all the time. You can feel much better after your first upper cervical adjustment. But as you've been in practice for 6 years, what does the healing process look like to you now?
It's definitely not linear, and
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, they've been misled through advertisements and crappy, like, sales pitches that are trying to get people to think that you should just gradually, continually improve, and everything gets better day by day. And that's just not the way anything of value in life works, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, I think healing follows, the laws of nature. There are cycles and seasons to it, and we should be able to see a trend in the right direction over time. But I think we got to reorient folks to thinking differently about healing compared to relief, and just refocusing on what is a way to measure progress over time, so that as you're healing, you can remind yourself that there is positive change happening. And because there are days that are easy, there are days that are hard, and not everybody's on the same, not everybody has the same metabolic capacity for healing, meaning their biochemistry and how their body heals is going to be different person to person. So it's hard to even project as a doctor, tell somebody how they're going to heal, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know
Yeah.
exactly how you're going to heal. We'll be honest about that. And so I like to tell folks a couple things, because they've got a few concerns, right? And if you put yourself in the shoes of the patient, they have a couple concerns that they want to know are being considered and addressed. Number one is, like, is this guy ripping me off, doing something that's not helping? And I'm coming here spending time and money and not getting anywhere. And the only thing they have to anchor to is how they feel, right? They don't know the testing part of it. And so I always tell folks, we should see things changing in the first 4 to 6 weeks. Doesn't mean everything's going to be better, but if we're a month in and we have the right adjustment and we have the right data and we're doing the right things, we should see things change, both in what you can feel, but things I can measure. And if we see that, we know that the healing process has taken place, and we can double down on it and stick with it. And it might take you another couple months, for that to really, come to fruition in a sustainable way. It may take even longer than that. I don't know.
Right.
But at that point, we're going to know that we're doing the right things and we're on that path. And I tell them, if we're not helping, I'll figure out why, and we'll troubleshoot how to facilitate healing. And the other part of it is it's not all about chiropractic. I mean, like when you talk about healing and the body's ability to adapt to its environment and the stressors that are put on it, there's a lot of stuff that goes on outside of our offices that impact how patients heal. So
Absolutely.
we need to be aware and remember that, and they need to be aware of it too. Because as much as we want to take credit for every positive outcome, it's like sometimes patients are doing other things that are helping themselves heal. And sometimes they're doing things that are, actively limiting how effective we can be and how much they can heal. So I think it's worth, especially in the early few visits, having conversations about their lifestyle and their routine and their habits and what's going on outside the office, just so we're aware of, some of the obstacles that might present themselves or some of the things that might facilitate healing. So I think for the chiropractor, we have to keep it in context. And I tell patients all the time, like, there's a lot of life that happens between visits, and I'm thinking for myself, let alone for them,
Yeah.
there's other doctor's appointments. There's other, things that they're trying and doing. There's sleepless nights. There's
100%.
stress at home with family and work. It's like, so, I like to remind folks that, like, hey, chiropractic care does not happen in a vacuum where
Yeah.
nothing else in your life is impacting our results. So we need to be open. We need to have open lines of communication with our patients about what's going on with them so that we can identify some of those challenges. Because sometimes we get frustrated.
Yeah.
We're like, man, why are we not getting where we need to go? And we might be missing just one little piece of information in the lifestyle.
Absolutely. I think there's two parts to that. There is so many different ways the atlas and the axis can misalign. So I think it's so important as a patient to give your upper cervical doctor a chance to figure out which adjustment is going to be right for you, because it could take a few adjustments. There's so many different factors. It's a very sensitive area up here. Sometimes it's going to take your upper cervical doctor a few visits to really understand, listen, I think we finally got it. This adjustment's going to hold best for you. As you know, sometimes if you adjust somebody on one side, it's not holding as well. You can flip them around and pull the adjustment up, and sometimes people hold better that way. So always give I like to tell people, give upper cervical care at least 3 months for your body to heal, for your doctor to know what adjustment works best for you. And then there's also a factor on the other side of that coin, which you mentioned before. Sometimes we don't know what's going on at home. I have a funny story. One of my patients, a very challenging vertigo case. I was seeing him about 2 times a week for a month, and he was not holding his adjustments, and re-x-rayed, did all the analysis. I had Dr. Jeff, my other doctor in our practice, look at it. We're both kind of just putting the pieces together. And then open lines of communication with your patient. So this person was having his wife walk on his back every day after work, like all the way up to the neck. And there's not much I can do as a doctor when your wife is literally walking on your back, stepping on certain aspects of your spine. He was doing it every day, popping his atlas out. And so I didn't know that. And so as a doctor, as a patient, you want to have that open line of communication, educating your patients what to expect, what to stay away from. So it's a two-sided coin, and that's a great point you brought up there, John.
And I gotta say, like, for patients, you can tell when someone is unrealistic with their expectations. And I think as younger doctors, in those situations where we're like, oh, this person is they're really not getting the idea that this is not a quick fix.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're a little bit more eager to go like, well, maybe it would be, I don't know, let's just try,
Mm-hmm.
and I think over time I've got more confident to tell folks like, look, man, if you expect me to fix, several decades worth of damage to your spine with one adjustment, and you waited till the point where it's so bad that you can barely function, that's not reasonable, right? That's not realistic. We'll work on it, but you got to admit that you didn't get this way overnight. You're not going to get out of this problem overnight either. And that's okay, right? It's like if you gained 100 pounds and you wanted to lose weight, you wouldn't show up to the gym and go, hey, trainer, like, my life's been a wreck for 6 years.
Yeah.
Now put me through a session to get me back on track. It's like, no, that's unrealistic. Right? It's not the way the body works. It's not physiologically reasonable to assume that would work. And so I was telling a lady in here the other day, it's like, there's very few things in healthcare that are as efficient as upper cervical.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one adjustment can make a huge difference, and it can hold for a long time, and you can make steady progress even with those speed bumps along the way. And then to maintain that over time, it's like, so what do you come in once a month and get checked? Like big deal. And if you get adjusted a handful of times a year and it helps, like, you got to be kidding me. There's who else can offer that?
Yeah.
It's like, what meal plan can you eat one healthy meal a month and stay and stay healthy? What workout routine can you do once a month and stay healthy? Right? It's like, it's unreal how efficient upper cervical is in terms of creating momentum and with the body and healing. And I think in that way, we need to be mindful that we don't overpromise, because we, expect miracles, right? We do, and we see them. And a lot of times, I've been guilty to be a little impatient with the healing process and go like, oh man, we're not getting it. Maybe we need to make a referral. Maybe we need to do something else. And I've even had patients say like, I don't really want to go do anything else. Let's just kind of wait it out.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people even intuitively know that, like, it just takes time,
Yeah.
and I understand that, like, I didn't get this way overnight. So
Absolutely.
I think those are all great points. And we need to remind ourselves as doctors to not get impatient, because then we'll adjust inappropriately or prematurely. And then as patients, just to buy in, and understand that it takes time. And if you're willing to commit to yourself, not to the chiropractor, right? You're investing in yourself, and you're committing to your own health. If you're willing to do that, you'll get the rewards. It's almost guaranteed.
Absolutely. And I think people forget when they come in with upwards of 10 neurological symptoms, things start to get better, but then they really start to hone in on one thing that's like really bothering them. So like if you have headaches and numbness and tingling and brain fog and dizziness, like they'll come in and be like, my dizziness is out of control today. And then they like, and then you start talking to them like, well, my migraines are gone. My brain fog is gone. The numbness and tingling isn't there, but they're still getting the dizziness. And I respect that. I get that. It's not fun to go through dizziness, but there is a lot of great things happening. And if you take a step back, the body's going to start to heal that as well. We've done a lot of great healing already. And it's just when you remove something, sometimes it magnifies another. So
100%.
there is some good healing going on in those cases too.
And it's a good idea as a chiropractor to do, progress evaluations periodically and check in with folks and go back to that early conversation you had when you took a history and you talked about all the concerns, because stuff just kind of gets off your radar. And it's almost every time I do a progress evaluation, I ask about, well, how you doing in this area? And they're like, I didn't even remember I had that. I don't even know when it went away. It's not a part of my life anymore.
Yeah,
it's like, yes, amazing. So it's good to pay attention to the challenges, to confront those head on, but you do need to be mindful over time that, like, sometimes things improve gradually. And I tell folks, like, I kind of like when things improve gradually, right? It seems like it's a little more stable. Some of the folks that have these magical, like, immediate health transformations with one adjustment, sometimes their symptoms are really volatile.
What goes up comes down.
And they'll crash too, right? And it's like, so I tell folks, like, hey, objectively, things are doing good. I know you're not feeling a ton of difference early on, but this is perfect. Like, this is the path you want to be on, which is gradual, sustainable results. And so, it doesn't come in any one form or fashion. And it's like, I tell folks all the time when we go through their exam report and explain what's going on, it's like, people that come here with problems like yours, there's not a neck pain adjustment. There's not a migraine adjustment. There's not a, like, this is how it works in medicine. So people think, well, because I have this symptom, you'll do the adjustment for that symptom. That's not the way it works. So back to the conversation about function. It's like everybody that comes here and gets better with migraines, we treat them how they need it, right? And so, like, we're going to target the dysfunction. We're going to focus our attention on improving that alignment, improving the health and function of the nervous system, improving the balance in the body. And those symptoms should improve. there could be other things that are contributing to your symptomatology. So if the symptoms improve slightly and plateau, or they don't improve while all these other things do, well, then we can start to troubleshoot and figure out what else you need to do to get relief. But we try to keep the dysfunction at the center of it and focus our attention on, all we can really do as doctors is take care of that upper cervical subluxation, and to do that thoughtfully and with systems and procedures that we know are tried and true. And if you get a little bit, as a doctor, if you get a little bit fixated on the symptoms and you start chasing that stuff around, trying to force the issue with the healing process or with the body, you can get yourself into trouble. So I think, I've done that too, where you kind of lose a little bit of your grounding and go like, I really want that symptom to go away, so I'm going to try to force it. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. John, at the end of every episode, I like to ask all my guests, what is one piece of advice that has really resonated with you over the years? Could be absolutely anything, could be upper cervical, could be just whatever you feel like's on your heart today.
I think just in thinking about this conversation and reflecting on the last 6 years of practice, I think there's a process of self-discovery that needs to happen in your life. And I think a lot of times, the times where we find the real nuggets, of wisdom, and the real good things come from our hearts and our minds, and that, put us on a path of making a positive change in life, I think come from times where we have a little bit of quiet, and a little bit of like space from all the noise, and the times where I've been the most confused and frustrated in practice were the times where I was letting too many people influence my idea of what I should want and what success should look like for me. And so I think over time, if you can spend some time with yourself and your thoughts and your priorities and your values, and really identify what you want out of life, and find folks that can help you, stay on a path towards what you actually want, and create, success for yourself, and identify what that means for yourself. I don't know. I'm big into that lately, because I've gone through different evolutions where I really trusted myself, and other times where I didn't. And the times where I didn't and was looking for the answers outside of me is where I got the most mixed up and confused. So, I would say listen to that still small voice, and find ways to cultivate that, because the more you pay attention to it, the more loudly it'll speak to you, and then that'll never lead you astray. And I think that's worth investing in. It's worth cultivating that and building that up.
I love that. Very powerful message, John. Dr. John Stenberg, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you, listen to your podcast, and find you on social media?
Yeah, check out the Atlas of Chiropractic Podcast. It's pretty much anywhere you might be subscribing and listening. We talk about a wide range of topics related to the practice and science of upper cervical chiropractic. And that's more for the healthcare providers and doctors. But, if you're a patient, you want to listen in on what are these folks talking about, and how do I choose a good doctor, there would be some nuggets there for you too. At Zenith Chiro on Instagram is kind of where I spend the most time on social media. I'm playing around with Threads. We're going to try that out and see.
What is that? I saw something pop up on my Instagram the other day about Threads. I have yet to know. I don't know what that is.
I mean, it's basically the Instagram version. It's the metaverse version of Twitter. It's kind of more or less the same type of platform.
Cool.
But it's interesting because there's a lot of organic interactions happening there. It's not full of bots and spammers and weird stuff now. So we be having some conversations on there. And then, I think my practice is in Colorado Springs, and I have folks reach out all the time for a referral. So if you're looking for help and you don't know what kind of chiropractor to find in your area, just reach out to Zenith Upper Cervical Chiropractic. I'm happy to get you connected with a friend or a colleague closer to you, because there are a lot of folks out there that can help you, that aren't so out in the, in the content space as Kevin and I, and haven't made as much of an effort to be visible, but will help connect you, because there's a lot of really great, thoughtful, excellent doctors that are there for you.
All right. Dr. John, thank you for coming on the show. Would love to have you back anytime. And we'll catch up soon. And I'm excited to see you at the Blair Annual in Las Vegas in September.
Love it.
All right, brother.